Okay, I'm going to read you chapter 24 and it's called The Interview. Okay. Although Brendan the bully wasn't bullying Ahmed anymore and Mr. Irons was gone, I was still feeling worried. 8 whole days had passed since our emergency adventure and Ahmed's parents still hadn't been found. And even though Mrs. Saunders had said the Queen couldn't really help us, I knew that deep down we were all still hoping that she would do something. The hardest thing was trying to make Ahmed understand that the Queen hadn't been able to help. Every morning, as soon as he would see us in the playground, he would ask, "The Queen will find today, yes?" After a few days of trying to tell him no and seeing him look sad, we began to shrug and say maybe, as hopeful as we could. "The gates all have been shut last Friday," said Josie quietly as she gave her ponytail an angry pull. Even though we didn't usually have PE on Thursday, Mrs. Carner decided to treat us. So we were all sitting on a bench waiting for the climbing frame and feeling sad. "Ahmed, your turn," said Tommy, pointing to the free space at the climbing frame. Ahmed ran over to the bars and leapt up the highest rung he could reach. He was as good at climbing as he was at football. When I asked him how he could jump so high and climb so fast, he shrugged and said, "Fences." "If the gates are shut already and no one's helping us to find Ahmed's family, why do you think the reporters are still here?" asked Michael, carefully patting the sides of his afro so that it would stay in place when it was his turn at the climbing frame. It was a question all of us had been asking ourselves because even though there was fewer reporters than last week, they were all still asking us questions about Ahmed whenever they saw us. Maybe they think we'll try to do something else to help Ahmed find his family, and they're just wanting to see what it is, suggested Josie. For the rest of the day, we tried our best not to think about reporters and the newspaper appeal and the Queen, but on our way back home, our reporter suddenly shouted out, "Kids, what do you think of Mr. Fry's views on refugee children like Ahmed?" And another one shouted, "Do you have a response? Do you want to say something back to him?" We all said, "No comment," just like we always did, but we gave each other a puzzled look. None of us knew who Mr. Fry was, or what he had to do with us or Ahmed, but we promised each other that we would try and find out that night. When I got home that afternoon, I found lots more reporters in front of my flat. It was strange because there used to be only 1 or 2 before, but now there was at least 50, and they were all shouting questions at me about Mr. Fry. I ran past all of them as fast as I could and saw Mum standing just inside the main door looking out for me. "Mum," I cried out, running up and hugging her as she quickly buzzed the door open. "You're home early." Mum hugged me back and hurried me inside. When we got to our flat, I could see the television was on, which was another sign that something odd was happening because Mum only really watches telly at night. Quickly switching off the telly, Mum bent down to look at me closely and asked, "Are you okay? It can be scary having so many people chasing you and asking you questions." I nodded. "But Mum, why are you home so early?" Mum stroked my cheek before replying, "Because I need you to do something really important and help us all to help Ahmed." Motioning me to sit down at the kitchen table, Mum placed a large peanut butter sandwich in front of me and a glass of milk. My stomach gave a growl because it likes peanut butter sandwiches the best, even though they make my mouth go sticky. "Darling, do you know who Mr. Fry is?" "He came to your school once, a long time ago. He's our local MP." I frowned and shook my head, but the reporters were asking about him. Mum nodded. "I bet they were," she said, shaking her head as she sat down opposite me. Grabbing some newspapers from the kitchen counter, she spread them out in front of me. "This is why," she said. Her voice was calm, but her cheeks were pink, so I could tell she was cross about something. I looked down at the newspaper. They were all different, but all of them had the same picture on the front. It was a man with grey hair wearing a dark suit and a blue tie, and above him in big letters were headlines like "No more, refugee influx flooding Britain, and Britain's needs must come first," and "MP Fry labels Buckingham Palace kids radical refugee terrorists." My heart beat fast at this last headline, But before I could read anything else, Mum gathered the papers back up again. Let's put these aside for now, darling. I don't want you to read the articles because most of it is just silly nonsense. I watched as Mum turned to put the newspaper back onto the counter and then faced me again. The reason I showed them to you is because I wanted you to see the kinds of headlines Mr. Fry has helped to create today, and for you to understand that there are people like him who think refugee children like Ahmed should be allowed into the country. But why not, Mum? I asked, feeling angry. Okay, I'm just going to pause there.